Alright, let's talk about 13, Standard 13, Substandard D. Explain Ida Tarbell's role as a muckraker. We talked about what a muckraker was, and we said that Theodore Roosevelt coined the term when he referred to John Bunyan's Pilgrim Progress character, a man that could look nowhere but downwards with a muckrake in his hands. Muckrakers are often indispensable to society, but only when they know when to stop raking the muck. That was a quote he made, and he coined this phrase muckrakers for these investigative journalists. Like we talked about Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, and he actually read that book and asked Congress to pass the Meat Inspection Act and the Pure Food and Drug Act, which they did after doing that. We talked about the muck in the pond, my personal experience, and how we showed that, how that illuminated their purpose. Muckrakers' purpose was to illuminate the problems associated with rapid industrialization, urbanization, and immigration in the cities. Journalists that used writings to expose corruption, government scandal, or wrongs in society. They investigated and exposed problems caused by rapid industrialization and urbanization. Their characteristics: they were to inform the public or influence the government policy, have the government change its policies, become more active, cause a change in society. Upton Sinclair, The Jungle, Ida Tarbell, The History of Standard Oil. Not examples of literatures that cover up and hide scandals and wrongs during that time period. Ida Tarbell wrote for McClure's magazine and wrote a series of articles concentrating on John D. Rockefeller, the oil titan. We talked about the Standard Oil Company and create a monopoly or trust using horizontal consolidation or integration. From 1902 to 1904, she wrote the series of articles, and in 1904 they were published into a book called The History of Standard Oil Company, and she was the author, Ida M. Tarbell. She wrote about the unfair business practices used by John D. Rockefeller, and she called the government to change its policies away from laissez-faire and toward active government, and asked them to make antitrust legislation to make the formation of trust and monopolies illegal, and called on the government to regulate that activity and make sure it never happened again. Ida Tarbell is going to portray John D. Rockefeller, the owner of Standard Oil Company, as a bad-tempered, stingy, money-grabbing, and viciously effective. He was viciously effective at monopolizing the oil trade, creating the trust that destroyed small business. And she does that effectively in her writing. And that was her book, The History of Standard Oil Company. And after it is read by Congress and other politicians, by 1914, it took a good decade, but the Clayton Antitrust Act and the Federal Trade Commission Act were passed in 1914. The Clayton Antitrust Act restricts the formation of cartels or prohibits other collusive practices regarded as being in restraint of trade. In other words, to destroy trade or competition. Restricts the mergers and acquisition of organizations which could substantially lessen competition. Prohibits the creation of a monopoly and the abuse of monopoly power, just like John D. Rockefeller had done to create his Standard Oil Trust. And then the Federal Trade Commission Act was part of the United States Department of Justice. It regulated mergers and acquisitions and the formation of companies, and it's going to help state governments and private parties who are sufficiently affected so that they can bring lawsuits to court and enforce antitrust laws. So we see here with Ida Tarbell's The History of Standard Oil, she calls on government to become more active, and they do. So she is instrumental as a progressive, as a muckraker progressive, in changing the role of government from laissez-faire, doing nothing at all, and allowing John D. Rockefeller to create that trust, Andrew Carnegie to create his using vertical integration. That now there's a change in the role of government. Now, under progressive laws, antitrust laws, there's going to be antitrust legislation. Monopolies are not going to be allowed. Trust formation will be illegal. And a good way to remember Ida Tarbell for the test is Standard Oil Company was an oil producer. Ida's last name, Tarbell. Tar is some types of tar is a byproduct of petroleum, just like oil is, like the tar they put on streets and the tar they put on roofs. That's how I tell my students to remember it. Tar's in the name. Maybe that'll give you a memory aid to help you. There were other muckrakers as well. I wanted to name them here quick, even though they're not in our standards. Ida B. Wells we talked about because she was in the women reform movements. She wrote a Red Record and provided statistics and analysis of lynching or hanging of African Americans in the South. And the NAACP is eventually going to fight for federal anti-lynching laws, and some are going to be passed. Jacob Reese was a photographer and also wrote a book called How the Other Half Lives, exposing the living conditions of the urban poor in cities and focused on tenement housing. And New York City is going to pass building codes to promote safety and health for fire and sanitary conditions in living. Thomas Nast was an artist, a cartoonist, and his political corruption of in New York City of Tammany Hall, corruption of William Boss Tweed, is going to lead to his conviction for embezzlement, and Tweed's going to die in prison. So these are some other muckrakers. Alright, so Ida Tarbell's influence, though, as a progressive, she leads to antitrust laws with her book, the Clayton Antitrust Laws, her book, The History of Standard Oil. And so we have met our objective, explaining Ida Tarbell's role as a muckraker and as a progressive. So good luck on the quiz and the test and the EOCT.